if he is not there, which is ironic because I just wrote that on the board, and it's not what we're doing. Look what we got. So this class is supposed to be a basic Judaism, and we're supposed to, we're over here. We're only over here because my streaming guy is not there. I don't know what's going on. But this is supposed to be about basic Judaism. It's okay. That's really okay. Come on. I can't hear, there's no one that can hear anything beyond what's on my microphone. So if any of you are making googly noises, I won't say how old you are. If you're making googly noises, nobody will know. Nope. All right, so I've got a handout for you, and the kids are not here today to do my handing out of things. Here's some for you guys. That's right, they're helpful. Yeah. So I've got handouts about keeping kosher. Keeping kosher means a few things. Officially, in the Torah, it specifies a few kinds of foods that we are allowed to and not allowed to eat, mostly in the book of Leviticus. And essentially, and I think we've got that over here, actually. I think I have it here. The things that you have there. This is from the My Jewish Learning website. It seemed to be fairly concise. A lot of times if somebody asks, this is how they describe it. If somebody asks you, what does it mean to have kosher food? A lot of people say, well, I got blessed by the rabbi. That's not 100% true. It helps if it's blessed by a rabbi, I guess, although rabbis can bless things and it doesn't make it kosher. And there are things that don't have to be blessed by a rabbi for the food to be kosher. I have a video I want to show you, though, that's kind of, it does show a rabbi trying to bless everything. But the word kasher in Hebrew means fit or proper. So it's fit for eating. And it comes from Torah. This is talking about the fact that if you look at the history of food, you might find that it feels like humans were originally supposed to be vegetarian. And ironically, I think, after Noah and his family lived with those animals for all of those days, and it's not just 40 daisies, it was a long time, it was way longer than that. 40 daisies rained, and then there was another chunk, and there was another chunk, and it was almost a whole year. And I think it's almost a whole year. And if I count up all the numbers. And then they get off the ark, and the first thing that they're allowed to do is eat animals. That seems weird to me. After I'd lived with those animals for so long, the last thing I can imagine doing would be eating them. But that's when we start to eat animals, is after we've just lived with the animals on the ark for so long. Go figure. But it's not until we get to Leviticus that it explains to us that there are certain animals that are proper for us to eat and certain animals that are not proper for us to eat. I had friends who were not Jewish, I call them Torah-observant non-Jews, who talked about the foods that the Torah tells us not to eat as non-foods, like you wouldn't eat a table, that's a non-food. So other things like pork is just a non-food. God is defining these things as non-foods for us. So it turns out that if something has 4 legs, then it has to chew its cud, which has to do with double stomachs, ruminant, chew its cud, and have cloven hooves. So for example, a cow has cloven hooves. The hoof is going to be split, and a horse does not. And a giraffe chews its cud and has cloven hooves, so a giraffe could be kosher. Don't ask me how you... I remember asking the rabbi, when I moved here, Rabbi Moskowitz, may his memory be a blessing, was the rabbi at the other synagogue. And we went on a trip, we took the whole Hebrew school to Tyler, to the zoo. And he and I are standing in the giraffe house and looking up at the baby giraffe, which was still really tall. And we said, did we record that last video? We did, okay, good. We're recording now too. So anyway, I said, did we I looked at this giraffe that's all the way up here, and even though it's baby, and I said, and I knew Rabbi Moskowitz had been trained as a shochet, which means a ritual slaughterer officially, someone who can officially, like a butcher. And I said, Rabbi, how do you shecht a giraffe? It's hard, they don't usually teach that stuff in shechting school. It is officially kosher. Some rabbis will tell you that because it's hard to find the exact spot, when you shecht an animal, one of the guidelines is that the animal is not supposed to feel any pain whatsoever. The knife has to be perfectly sharp. And so perfectly sharp means you're not going to feel the pain until it's too late. Like when you get a paper cut, sometimes it cuts first and then it hurts. When you have a perfectly sharp knife, you shouldn't feel the pain. And it's very different from other acceptable ways of killing animals that panic the animal, and then there's adrenaline running through the animal and all these things. Supposedly, the way of killing animals in a kosher tradition is healthier for the animal, more humane, and also healthier for us. So if it chews its cud, and it has cloven hooves, it is kosher. There's an adorable story about the pig, because the pig has cloven hooves. And in fact, the pig, when it eats, when it sits down, most other animals, when they sit down, the four-legged ones, their legs go behind them. And the pig has its legs out in front of it like this. And the rabbis teach this story about how that's because it's supposed to say, look at me, I have cloven hooves. And it's trying to trick you because you can't see the part about the inside, whether it's chewing its cud or not. But it's not kosher, don't eat it. So if it chews its cud and has cloven hooves, split hooves, it is kosher. If something is in the sea, if it's a creature of the sea, then if it has fins and scales, then it is kosher. So can you think of animals, any fish that have fins and scales? Which one? Redfish. Now we're back to Dr. Seuss. Whitefish, redfish. Not catfish. Catfish does not have scales. Not flounder. Flounder, I think, does. No. But, well, so here, what it turns out is, in the big scheme of things, is that usually the scavengers of the sea are not kosher. So it's not just those fish, like the catfish is a scavenger, but it's also all the shellfish are not kosher. And those are scavengers. All the shellfish are not kosher. So the question is, what if they're raised on a farm? And I actually have, then it has to do with what is your definition of why did God say so? And that's a really good question. Let's talk, please remember that question, because I have people in my congregation who answer that in one way. The rabbis may answer it in a different way, but I'm going to show you a way of thinking about it. So then there's the birds, and there's a list in the Torah of birds that you shouldn't eat, and most of the list are names of birds that we don't know what they are because we don't know how to make them correspond to today's lists of birds. But it seems to be that birds of prey are always forbidden, and then it's the kind of generic, like a pigeon or a dove is kosher. Chicken is kosher. It does not mention turkey. I don't think it knew what a turkey was at the time. I hate to tell you that, but in the Middle East, I don't think they existed then. But turkey fits into the kind of category that would be kosher. And so after you've got, and then by the way, so there are actually some places talk about 3 categories of animals. You've got the four-leggeds, you've got the underwater, and you've got the flying. But there's another category, and that's the bugs. So there are certain bugs that are kosher. It has to do with the kind of legs it has and other things, but who cares? Don't eat bugs. That's just don't eat bugs, okay? And so the next part has to do then with, there's one other rule in the Torah that it talks about, and it says 3 times, it says, do not cook a baby goat in its own mother's milk. Don't cook a baby goat in its mother's milk, which you can imagine all kinds of reasons why that would be a really not nice thing. You know, you have to eat, and so you take the baby goat to eat the baby goat, and it's inappropriate to cook it in the milk that was supposed to be nourishing it. It's just, that would be wrong. Or perhaps it's considering the mother and saying you don't want the mother to know that its milk went to feed its baby, to cook its baby? Or, there's all kinds of reasons you can imagine why that would be a wrong thing. And especially after you've heard it, you can imagine it's a wrong thing. But then the question comes up, what about if it's cow's milk and a goat? Could I cook a goat in cow's milk? Is it something about the milk part that's bad? Or is it something about the fact that it's the mother's milk? Is it any mother's milk that's bad? And you know what? I'm not sure. And nobody's sure. And so the rule has come up that you should never have dairy with meat, ever. I knew it was coming. I saw it. Never have dairy with meat, ever, in the same dish, in the same meal. Never do it. There are some people who will have dairy first, like a first course. Let's say you have your salad and you sprinkle some cheese on there, and then you have some pasta and you put some cheese on there. Then you clear the whole table and you use very different dishes. I have a different set of dishes for my meat things than I do for my dairy things. Because I don't know what God meant. I don't know why God said, separate the milk from the meat things. Don't do that. And I feel like I don't want to take a chance that I'm doing something wrong. So I have a whole set of silverware that's just for meat. And I have a whole set of dishes that's just for meat stuff. I have a whole set of pots and pans that are just for meat stuff. And I have another set that's not for meat things, of everything. It's really hard to have a kitchen that has at least enough room for 2 sets of everything. And you never let it mix in the same drawer in the kitchen, and you never wash the things in the same sink with the same sponge, the same towel. Never, ever. So, all right, so we've got those things. I wanted to show you this really adorable video, if I may. This is one of these reality TV shows that talks about, and I just saw this for the first time, but it talks about this caterer who is a great caterer, but one of his clients is now engaged to an Orthodox Jewish woman. The client is not Jewish, but he's trying to impress the Orthodox Jewish family. And so he wanted to make sure that the food was appropriately kosher to be able to serve it to his in-laws to be. I'm going to put this here like this. I hope that that's going to work. Stay there. And let's see. This is from YouTube. If you look up, prepare a kosher meal, then it's going to show you some things, and it shows a rabbi.
But a client that I have cooked for a couple times before. Brian, Nick. Hi, how are you? Nick loves my food, but this time it's very special because he's married into this Orthodox Jewish family. They keep kosher. You know, this is something that I've heard about, keeping kosher, but I don't know about what it really means. So he's got to have someone to kind of talk me through a kosher dinner. I walk into the kitchen, and there's the rabbi.
That's Rabbi.
Rabbi
David.
David. Yes.
Okay. Like David, but with an
But David. This is this is real. I wasn't expecting this. He's got the beard, he's got the black hat, and kind of stoic.
As you know, I've married into a Jewish family. I'm not Jewish myself, but this is my way of connecting with them all, and I really need your help.
You've got the rabbi, you've got the Australian Nick, and Chef Brian, black dude, talking about ingredients. I don't know anything about a kosher meal, but I am quick study.
Well, we'll find out about that.
Oh, okay. I gotta tell you, I'm a little nervous. First rule of kosher, the rabbi must supervise. Will you be here every step of the way?
Yes.
So literally, as I'm chopping and roasting and...
I'll be breathing down your neck.
This dinner is either gonna be dessert or disaster. Because if I break a rule, one rule, with Rabbi David, Nick's dinner...
There's different animals.
So is it necessary for a rabbi to be watching every step of the way in order for your food to be kosher? No, it truly isn't. But the reason why this rabbi has to watch is because the guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he could make a mistake. So the rabbi's going to watch and do it. If you were somebody who were trained in what to do about keeping kosher, you can be trustworthy about checking your own food. Even if you're someone who's trustworthy about checking your own food, there is a possibility that you will have a question about something. And then you maybe should consult the rabbi about it. But the first rule of keeping kosher is not that a rabbi has to supervise every single thing. But if you buy foods in the store that are kosher, a rabbi will have supervised the process to make sure that the equipment that they use has not, if it was meat, it hadn't touched anything dairy, and if it was dairy, it hadn't touched anything meat. If it's anything, that it has not come in contact with anything that is not kosher. Because if you accidentally take, let's say, a spoon, and you put that spoon in something that is not kosher, or if you take a dairy spoon and put it into something that, touch it to something like some meat soup, or vice versa, that spoon can no longer be used. You may be able to make it kosher again, but it would take, depends on what it was that made it not kosher. You may have to bury it for a while, you may have to burn it for a while, you may have to sterilize it. Depends on what it is that you did to make it not kosher and what material it's made out of. So sometimes having a rabbi around may seem like a pain in the neck. It feels like a pain in the neck to this guy. Wait till you see. But that's the first rule, and it's not necessarily. It's still adorable that they're doing it this way. So it's
Animals we're allowed to eat, different kind of products we're allowed to use. One of the kosher laws is you cannot mix meat and milk together.
As serious as I thought it was, well, it got a little more serious once he told me the rules.
This side of the sink is used for only meat dishes.
Left side.
The left side. These are all meat. You can use these. Now over here, you cannot use them. These are off limits. Dairy dishes, we're not even going to go in this area.
I'm like, should I have a pad and a pen?
The bottom one is a dairy oven, so you cannot use this one.
Okay, yeah.
And just him taking me through that is exhausting.
And I can just start in on preheating?
Well, actually, you cannot.
I, Chef Brian, cannot light the stove. It must be lit by Rabbi David. I did bring my own knives. Now, I see your face.
I can't use my tools. I have to use the tools that have been blessed, that are kosher.
Oh, here.
So is it because they're blessed that he has to use them? No, it's because they're kosher. They've only ever been used for meat things. They have never been, I hate the word, but we'll say contaminated by something that isn't. Could he have had really good knives that were appropriate? Yeah. Did he get really good knives? No, his knives are not so wonderful. And that's really hard on a chef.
These are the knives.
So not only do I have to make certain that the dairy and meat don't collide, but I have to use some old, wretched knives. Everything I had ever learned and I experienced in the kitchen, that's done.
So I'm in the kitchen with Rabbi David, trying to get the meal ready for Nick's family. Okay, let's get started.
First, I have to inspect the products to make sure
Okay,
that they're
perfect. Let me start to pull out some of them. I bought all of my ingredients from the kosher market.
Nice.
And came up with a menu that I think Nick's family is gonna love.
They want a couple appetizers, a couple sides, and they must have lamb. Even though this is kosher, they still want some yumsters. I'm like, you know what? Let me still give a little Chef Brian in here.
What are you going to use the jasmati rice for?
Oh, I'm gonna do, that's the baked sweet and savory rice with the dates.
We're going to have to check those.
In kosher cooking, the rabbi has to inspect everything. And they are really your supervisor.
Just keep on going. We're looking for bugs.
Okay.
That's what we're looking for.
Oh, okay. Rabbi,
This is serious. You do have to look for bugs because bugs are not kosher. So if you've got a package of rice, even though the package of rice says kosher on it, you still have to check to make sure that there were no bugs in it. That's especially difficult with like salads. If you've got a head of lettuce, you have to take apart each piece of lettuce to make sure that there was no bugs in it. Which is why some people, if they keep strictly kosher, won't even eat a salad that has nothing in it, no meat, no anything, a salad in a restaurant because they don't know that the salad hadn't been checked for bugs. So here we are checking every grain of rice.
David sees one little imperfect rice, and he's like, well, what's this? I say, well, that's an irregular grain there.
We'll have to throw it out. More than one of them have it, then there may be a problem with the whole batch.
If he thought that something was tainted, it's done. Here's my dates.
The whole batch.
Okay, I can pull
No,
that.
no.
Oh, okay, no, I'm not.
But if you notice something, you'll let me know.
Okay, got that. So I'm not to touch this, though, until you've inspected.
Right. Exactly. There may be a problem with the whole batch.
And I'm like, I don't have a backup though.
I think that's just the skin.
Yeah.
I think it's like kind of dried, so it kind of turns.
It's fine.
Do you know how labor intensive that is?
It looks good.
Yep.
One by one, it took him like 25 minutes to inspect each and every date.
What I'm trying to now wrap my brain around is countering like the fact that you have to inspect and also be on time.
I hope you make it.
Thanks.
That's me.
I'm used to doing this a lot faster. You know what? See how dull that is? It's pressure enough getting the food out, but now you have to make certain that it stays kosher.
We have 2 sets of everything in our kosher kitchen.
And you keep meat and dairy separate. And I'm like, I gotta get this right, but I have to make certain that the food comes out in a timely manner because the guests are arriving soon. I've got the ginger, the sea salt, veggie stock. All right, we're cooking now. I'm back now. They insisted that I make lamb. They must have lamb, number one. Must.
The best way to do this lamb is to pan sear it, you know? Get it all smoky, the flavors of fresh garlic, the kosher salt, the black cracked pepper. Woo!
Wait a minute. Where am I? Not a lamb. No, they're not in the freezer. Oh!
So my assumption with the 2 refrigerators, the 2 sinks, the 2 ovens, is that there's a meat side of the refrigerator and a dairy side of the refrigerator. No, my friend. I put the lamb in the freezer.
What's with the meat? When are we going to start preparing the meat?
I just looked, and the meat is in the freezer.
You're kidding.
I'm not even close to joking with you. So I'm gonna have to char broil as opposed to the pan searing, which is what I wanted to do initially.
I gotta shift it to overdrive now and use that 1 oven to now roast the lamb.
Well, actually, I have to pray the afternoon prayer right now, which means I'm leaving the kitchen, and you have to come with me.
Like, you mean we have to stop?
You can't be in here by yourself without me supervising.
But I've got food. While he's doing his afternoon prayer right before dusk, I'm praying that my food doesn't burn. My client, Nick, needs to impress his new Orthodox Jewish family that keeps kosher. Nick has family coming in from all over the country. And I have frozen lamb.
Okay, you gotta be very careful, because now we're dealing with meat, which it can be really problematic if it gets mixed with milk right now.
The clock is ticking, the pressure, it's on my back.
We're on high alert here, because now that the meat is out, we have to be extra careful.
All right. Oh, great.
Once I brought the lamb out of the freezer, the whole game changed.
Okay, so I'm gonna now put it in the pot.
Yes, but be very careful with the dairy sink.
Rabbi David was already breathing down my back, but now he was so determined not to have that meat come close to that dairy sink.
You know, let's even extend, let's try to...
Okay. If I make a wrong move and bump into that bowl and knock that meat over, it's done.
It's a learning process.
It is an absolute learning process, my friend. After maneuvering around those meat and dairy sinks, I'm proud to say every last lamb shank will be joining us for dinner. And I think I'm about half hour out, right?
20.
Oh my gosh. Oh no, I'm not a half hour out. Okay. I can hear the party out in the dining area, and it sounds like a full house.
How's it going?
Okay, so let's see here. I'm plating the salad, and then the soup is probably another 15.
15?
Yeah. I know. Now,
Okay.
you can see the pressure on his face. The food has to come out, and I am so far behind. I don't think I've ever been this far behind, ever. The food has to come out, and I am so far behind. I'm gonna need help. Nick says, I can help you. Next thing you know,
Nick's helping, Rabbi David's helping, so finally, we're rocking and rolling, baby.
what a team we got here.
Rabbi David, he's doing the sexy on the soup with the pepper. And it was kind of fun seeing Rabbi David do his thing, you know? Then you've got Nick serving
My roasted red pepper and butternut squash soup.
It's because of you guys. that this has been made possible. So
The credit really goes to Brian, you know, with put on the spot here, putting in, you know, something in production he's never done before. He did a fabulous job. And I think you've earned this as a gift.
Is this a keeper?
This is a kippah, yes.
I went in, I respected the culture and the rules of kosher cooking, and he's saying to me, thank you, my friend, for listening. I learned so much, and I actually can say that we pulled it off. Is this it?
It suits you.
I like that, sorry. Isn't that adorable? And it gives you a little bit of a perspective about what it's like to have to cook kosher, except it's usually not that stressful as what he made it to be. I have another video if we want to watch, but I thought maybe we should talk. Wrapped around. Back. That's a good question. Maybe. I don't know, because the guy was Australian and the whatever. There may be, let's see if there's more information on the video. I don't remember. I just found the video and liked it.
The call from Tom about a client that I had cooked.
It would have been very unusual for that, I thought. It says this was Beverly Hills. Private chefs of Beverly Hills learns what it takes to cook a kosher meal. Yeah, it would be very unusual. And I'm a little bit surprised at some of those things. If they kept kosher enough that they had to worry about having kosher meat, etc., I don't know why they would have trusted some other chef, although the rabbi was watching everything, and that may be why, but I'm a little bit surprised. I don't know what their day-to-day world is like, this couple. Is he really trying to keep kosher all the time? And is she, and you know, I do know other families a little bit like this, where one person, where they marry, let's say, an Orthodox Jew or a traditional Jew, and then potentially what may have happened is they don't. They may not keep kosher at their house. And yet when her family comes, if they keep kosher, they will try to make sure that they can serve what they have to serve. That happens in my world, that because I keep kosher, if I go to somebody's house, they will try to make sure that what they serve is always kosher. I usually avoid having anybody try to serve me meat. That's never a good idea. Because as you saw, the pressure escalates when there's meat. If all you ever have is vegetarian or dairy, then there's not pressure about mixing milk and meat. There's no pressure about that at all. And the rules are way more relaxed because you don't have to worry about what kind of animal is in the food or how the animal was killed or what you did with it after the fact. Because what happens is this. So we talked about the laws about which kind of animals were allowed. But once you know that, let's say, a goat is allowed, it has to be, as we talked about, slaughtered in a specific way that absolutely has no pain to the animal. And then you have to drain all of the blood, because it also says at least 3 times that you're not allowed to eat the blood of an animal. And there are certain body parts that it tells us we're not allowed to eat. And so you know you have to remove all of those things, and you have to remove all the blood. So they drain all the blood, and then they salt the blood overnight to draw out the rest of the... So when you see something called kosher salt in the supermarket, it doesn't mean that there's something next to it that is not kosher salt. There's nothing specifically about salt that is not kosher. Kosher salt means koshering salt, the kind of salt that you use to make something kosher. Because if I took table salt and I tried to soak a giant piece of meat in a chicken in table salt, the grains of the salt in the table salt are way smaller, and it wouldn't absorb the blood as quickly. Kosher salt is much bigger grains, and it absorbs the blood better. It's also great for if you live up north and you have an icy driveway. You pour the kosher salt on your driveway and it melts the ice a lot better because it's bigger granules. But it's not about kosher salt and not kosher salt. I don't think I have ever seen a salt that is not kosher. So how do you know if it's kosher? Take a look at the signs I've given you on that other handout. So we have these are the most common symbols in this country for showing that it's kosher. This top one, the U in the O, is the most common. It's called hechsher. That means the kosher mark, because I showed you the word kasher is the word for kosher. So to say that it's got a kosher symbol is a hechsher, where I take the heh and I take this dot out because now it's at the end of the syllable, so it's a hechsher, and that means that it's kosher, kasher. So OU is the Orthodox Union of Rabbis, and they are the biggest organization that determines that things are kosher. Probably most of the things that you ate today that are kosher have that a symbol from there on there. I don't know if anybody's got any food on them or any gum or whatever, but if you notice, I mean, I had a little bottle of water here, and there's a O with a U on it, and you may not notice the O's with the U's or whatever, but check, for example, if you've got gum in your purse or something like that, if it has an OU on it. If not, there's probably something in there that is not considered kosher. Often, if it's candy or gum or sucking candies or mints, there's gelatin, and you know where gelatin comes from? Hooves, usually horse hooves, or bones of animals. And so you can make a kosher gelatin now. You'll find sometimes the ingredient, especially if it has the hechsher on it, it will say that it was from kosher gelatin. And that usually means that instead of animal bones, it comes from fish bones. The fish has to be kosher. Then you've got others here, like the triangle K, or KSA, or the CRC is from Chicago, star K. Those are some that you're going to see. Or this one, you'll see there's the Hebrew letter. They call this the Kaf K because Kaf is the letter in Hebrew, and then the K. And those are different rabbinic organizations. It is, it's more expensive usually because you've got to pay the rabbi to say, yes, it's kosher. They don't always have a rabbi that's supervising 24/7 in these places. But what they do is they get assurance from the people that if what you're making is gum, and you promise them that these are the ingredients that you're using, and you're not deviating from these ingredients, they have to make sure that every one of those ingredients is kosher. If it's something like sorbitol, blah, 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 something that has more of a chemical name than a food name, they will have to research that and make sure there's nothing in that maybe had come from animal products or bug products or something like that. They have to check all of that. When they approve all the ingredients, then they have to check the machinery that it's made on, and they have to check the premises to make sure that it's not like everybody's bringing their sandwiches in, and that their sandwiches could be pork, ham, and cheese sandwiches every day, and that could contaminate it somehow. So all of these things really do have to be really picky and strict. So if you chose to eat kosher foods, there was an advertising campaign at least in New York for a while for Empire, especially their kosher hot dogs, and their advertising campaign would say, "We answer to a higher authority." So you will find that the kosher foods are way healthier, way more pure. If you're eating a hot dog and it says it's 100% beef hot dog and it's a kosher hot dog, then you know that 100% of that hot dog is beef and it's kosher beef. If you eat an all beef hot dog and the FDA says, yes, I can say that it's all beef, it is not even close to 99% beef. It can be like B for beef. It could be 80% beef. And you don't want to know what some of the other ingredients can be. So let's say, I hate to say this, let's say a mouse got into the vat. FDA will allow one mouse to get into the vat and still make it so that you can eat it. I mean, one mouse isn't going to hurt in that kind of a quantity. In a kosher hot dog, one mouse will hurt. It's not good. There's a law in Jewish tradition that says that if something is less than 1/60th of the total, then it is possible that you could still eat the thing. What am I talking about? So imagine you're at home and you're a poor family and you had chickens and you have whatever, and so you make a chicken because it's Shabbat dinner. So it's Friday morning and you're making a chicken soup, and and that stretches the amount of chicken that you have. And you're making chicken soup, and your kids come home for lunch, and you're making them grilled cheese sandwiches, and you accidentally drop a piece of cheese, weensy piece of cheese, because the kids were like fighting over the cheese, and one little piece went plop right into the soup. If that one little piece of cheese was less than 1/60th of the total, then you don't have to throw out all of the soup. You don't plan a meal around that, though. You don't say, oh, you know what this could use? It could use just a little drip of cheese. You can't do that. You say, well, it's less than 1/60th. You can't do that. But you can, I mean, like, for example, you notice when he was rummaging through the grains of rice, if he found one, even if he found one bug, he could take the bug out and it's kosher again. If he found more than 2 bugs, that would be a problem. That becomes a questionable about whether it's less than a 60th or not. But as I say, most other foods, FDA, will allow a much greater percentage of things that shouldn't be in there, things you wished weren't in there, and that's not good. Not good. So and for example, let's say you want to be vegetarian, and you find food that says it's kosher. So one thing you can look for is if it's kosher and it says it's dairy, then you know with 100% surety there is absolutely no meat or meat products in it. So far we've got 2 different categories of food, and I was going to show you this one too. I gave you this one also. This is kind of a cool map that shows you different communities have their own. It's called Va'ad HaKashrut, which means kosher council. So Dallas has one. They've got rabbis that walk around to all the different restaurants and they make you pay them to be able to say, yes, your food is kosher. And Chicago and New York and almost every community has a Va'ad HaKashrut from there. It's a great way to make money, is to be able to say that something is kosher. We had Rabbi Moskowitz had the certification to be able to say that things were kosher from his rabbinic school. You have to tag on like an extra certification to your rabbinic degree. Rabbi Moskowitz was, who was the rabbi before Rabbi Koaler, had certification to say that it was kosher. And Rabbi Koaler would go to the different supermarkets, for example, and say that the bakery at Kroger is kosher, except that sometimes the icing on the cakes has gelatin in it, so don't have anything with icing, but other than that, you could have anything that you want. And then it would be really scary when he would take away that it was kosher. He's not around now. I do not have that authority, but I'm pretty good at reading labels. I mean, if you had a question, I'm pretty good at knowing what's in them or not, and it depends on your level of kashrut. So I wanted to go back to your question too. So we've got this list of what is allowed and what's not allowed, and the rabbis have built what they call fences around the law, which means if God says don't drink the blood, don't eat any blood of an animal, so then what if I drain all the blood? Well, is that enough? Well, so then what if I salt it? Is that enough? So then what if I always cook it not, beyond rare or medium rare? Is there a point where if I cook it enough, then there's no blood in there? Is that okay? And so there's these fences to try to make sure that you keep that central commandment. But then there are people, especially in the Reform movement, for example, in Reform Judaism, we look at the laws and we try to figure out how they have impact in our modern lives. So what did God mean? How does it have meaning to me in my life, the Keeping Kosher laws? And so a lot of people, and it's not just Reform Jews now, it goes all the way back to Rashi. It goes all the way back to before. We're talking hundreds of years now. It doesn't take a genius, but a lot of geniuses have thought about the fact that everything that God has said that we can eat is healthier than anything that God said we shouldn't eat. So I joke and I say, if you saw a lobster running around in the desert, don't eat it. But we know that like pork had trichinosis. And in a time when we did not have appropriate refrigeration or the tools to test the temperature and other things, it was more dangerous to eat pork, let's say, than cow meat because there wasn't the same threat of trichinosis. Or if you had tuna, sorry, I don't like being redundant. If you had tuna, there was less of a chance of having the kind of sickness you get when you go to the restaurant, you have lobster or clams or something like that. There's a better chance in shellfish of getting sick than there was of having tuna, for example. So it turns out that, not surprisingly, everything that God told us we should do was actually better. So some people think, you know what, it was obviously health reasons. God has given us all these laws for health reasons. But today, my rabbi, when I was confirmed, he was 30. He turned 30 the year I turned 15. He was a young guy, handsome little guy, very dashing guy. But he felt very strongly that the rules were about health reasons. And he said that if God were to give us these rules now, then it wouldn't be about pork, it would be about trans fats, and it would be about saccharin, and it would be red dyes number blah, 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 blah. And he looked up anything that was not healthy, and he would not eat anything that was not healthy. But a cheeseburger didn't seem to be, or whatever, ham sandwich, didn't seem to be a problem because he now knows how to refrigerate it and cook it, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as he's eating healthy, he thinks that would be better. And so that works for a lot of people. Well, actually, let me get to that one first. So a lot of people feel that way. It seems pretty obvious that there were health reasons behind this. So those health reasons are no longer a concern, so maybe God would give us another set. And I tend to disagree with that. I think that means that God would be the kind of God that says, "Psst, come here, Jews. I want you to eat healthy. Let everybody else eat garbage food. I don't care." That's not what I think was going on here. I think that God was saying, I want you to be holy, and holy means different. I want you to go to bed by 10. I don't care what Johnny next door is doing. I want you to go to bed by 10 because I said so, because that's going to make you different. It's not a matter of better or worse. It's just a matter of different. And so, don't eat these foods, eat these foods. It turns out that the foods that I'm telling you to eat are all healthy. I'm not saying eat, cardiac in a bun, cardiac arrest in a bun. I'm saying eat healthy foods, but do that. These are foods I don't want you to ever eat. It's not because they're not delicious. It's not because other people couldn't eat them. It's because this is what you do to set you apart. That's what I think. We are living creatures, and as living creatures, we have to eat in order to sustain ourselves. How awesome is it that every time we go to take any kind of nutrition, we are aware of the fact that God gave us a guideline. That's what I think. But there's an ethical component too. And so some people, especially now, are thinking about an ethical component. So if, for example, I know that I had salmon for lunch today. Salmon is endangered because of ways that they are capturing it. And if you eat it from these seas, then it could be that it's a terrible thing for the world, for ecology, for the salmon population, if you eat that. So what if I only eat fish that are farm raised, as you were saying, even if, let's say, I have a congregant here who would she'd eat catfish that was farm raised, even though it didn't have scales on it, but she felt more ethically appropriate by eating it because it wasn't depleting a natural population, and it was still healthy. It fit all of the categories of what she thought God was telling her. If you were asking my opinion, I would say that could be what God was intending. It could be that God was saying, think about what you eat. Pay attention, be ethical. The conservative movement just created a new ethical series of laws about keeping kosher. About, 10 years ago, maybe a little more, there was this awful discovery that this one primary meat supplying farm in Iowa that was supplying most of the kosher foods in the country was bringing in like illegal aliens, paying them almost nothing, treating them really poorly, and yet they were claiming that their food was kosher. Kosher, if you remember, means appropriate. This is not appropriate. And so even if the foods we were eating all followed the guidelines of how you took care of the animals, they weren't taking care of the people. That's not kosher. And so where do the lines get drawn? And so the conservative movement passed this law about ethical kashrut also, that you want to make sure that the places you're getting your food from, because it used to be you'd go to the butcher and you had your chicken with you, and they would slaughter your chicken. Or you'd go to the butcher and you'd pick which chicken it is, and then you'd go home and pluck it, and you had to know these rules. I won't do that. That's not me. I'm not going to do that. I will go and buy my frozen chicken that's already plucked and already cut. Thank you very much. Preferably already cooked if I could do that. But because then I know that they cooked it in a kitchen that was kosher, and that I don't have to worry about it. I just have to find the appropriate cooking utensil to make it in my house. I don't have to pluck the feathers. I don't want to do that. I remember my grandmother doing that. I don't want to do that. Blech. I remember even when I was in Italy, and my mother-in-law would go to the butcher and come home with these chickens, and like the beaks would be poking their heads out of the plastic bags as you're like, bleh, that's not what I want to deal with. So I'm trusting these other people to do what I need to make sure that my food is kosher, but I trust them. And now I think it's appropriate to have these ethical guidelines to make sure that their food cannot be deemed kosher unless it's not just meeting all of the biblical laws and all the rabbinic laws, but also the ethical laws as well. I like that guideline. An easy way to keep kosher is be vegetarian, because the laws about keeping kosher mostly have to do with the meats that you eat, and then all of these restrictions about meat. So if you eat vegetarian, you're okay. You can also eat any of the kosher fish, and that would be okay, because you don't have to worry about how the fish was killed. You have to worry about how the four-legged animals were killed and how the fowl were killed, but you don't have to worry about how the fish was killed. And most people are okay with having fish and dairy. There's also, by the way, another category of food we talked about. We talked about dairy, we talked about meat, but there's another category that's usually called parva, P-A-R-E-V-E, parva, which means neutral in Yiddish. So a neutral food is the kind of thing that you can have with dairy or with meat. So for example, a tomato. A tomato isn't dairy, it isn't meat. I can have a tomato with a cheese sandwich, and I can have a tomato on a hamburger, and only we wouldn't call it hamburger. No, just kidding. That was a joke. But you can have a tomato on either one, and it's parv, and it's fine. So sometimes, for example, mayonnaise. Mayonnaise can be kosher, and it will tell you on it if it's, sometimes it'll tell you if it's D, it'll have that one of these symbols, and next to it it'll have a D on it, and that will mean that it's dairy, or it will have, I hated this, margarine. I thought that the only purpose for margarine was so that you had parv butter. So you can have it with your meat meals, you can have it with your dairy meals. And then all of a sudden, most of the margarines that were being sold, even the ones that I got used to using, all of a sudden said DE on it. DE meant not that it's dairy. If you look at the ingredients, there's nothing dairy about it, but that it was made on dairy equipment. And because it was made on dairy equipment, you had to think of it as dairy. That was just mean. On the flip side, I remember when we had the Y2K scare, and that everything was going to change with the new millennium, and then the reverse about what was the coolest thing that happened in this last millennium. And so there was one kosher food site that was very excited because Oreos became kosher. Because up until Nabisco was using only animal shortening in all of their baking. And all of a sudden they found a vegetable shortening that they felt didn't compromise the taste of their products. And all of a sudden the Nabisco crackers, the Ritz crackers, and the Oreos were kosher. And that was like the best thing that happened all millennium. It was pretty cool, I have to say. But yes, question. What? All right, so cheeses, sorry? So cheese, there can be grades of how kosher cheese is, because some of the ways of making cheese, first of all, it obviously has to come from a kosher animal. So you can't have pig cheese. I don't even know if you can do that, I don't know. But so it has to come from a kosher animal. But sometimes the rennet, which is one of the ingredients that make it, that hardens it, sometimes the rennet comes from animals that are not kosher, and that becomes a problem. So there are some people, if you're very strict about keeping kosher, you will never eat out. You will only eat at another house where you know that they keep as strictly kosher as you do. You will not eat in a restaurant unless you know that it's a strictly kosher restaurant. You won't go, we used to tease the Hasidic rabbis near us about, well, if your kid was in the car with you and they were really, really thirsty and then they were really, really coughing a lot and you were right next to the McDonald's, wouldn't you go to just get a McDonald's water? It comes in a paper cup. It's not that it's touched anything and it's just water. Wouldn't you do that? And then there gets this other guideline, and the other guideline is sometimes the things that you do can give other people the impression that what you're doing is kosher. So if I'm eating in a McDonald's and you can't tell what I'm eating because you just drove by, then you may think, oh, if the rabbi eats at McDonald's, then there must be things at McDonald's that we can eat, or it must be okay. And so these rabbis would not go into McDonald's and they would not eat the McDonald's, not even if it was just water, they wouldn't do it. Sometimes they wouldn't do it at all if the dishes had ever touched anything that wasn't kosher. They won't eat anybody's house or in restaurants. I told you about the complications. What if it's like all paper, disposable, whatever, and it's just a salad and there's no dressing on it, it's just salad? Well, did they do this piece by piece breaking up of the lettuce to make sure there's no bugs in it, because you could be eating? As a matter of fact, there were chief rabbis in New York that deemed the tap water was not kosher, because when you look at it under a really good microscope, you see these little sea monkey things. You see these little things that look a little bit like crustaceans in it. Really, really, really submicroscopic. I mean, really good microscopes. You're not going to know they're there. No one's going to know they're there, but they know they're there. And as soon as you know they're there, then you got to deal with that. That's bad. So, yeah, sorry about that. They also did this taste test about New York water, and they took a whole bunch of different spring water companies worth of bottles, and they took all the covers off and they put them in cups, and they said, here, which is the one you like? And most people liked the tap water in New York more than they liked the fancy schmancy expensive bottled water. That was true. Or they have to say that in New York, I don't know. I bet there are things. Well, so the one important thing that I know I'm leaving out is that, and it's not that hard. I mean, this guy had conniptions because he didn't know what he was getting himself into before it happened. And it was the extra stress, the rabbi refusing to trust him with anything. I mean, I think you could have trusted him and said, I got to go pray now. You can chop up the lettuce, but don't touch anything else. I mean, you could have trusted him with chopping lettuce. He can chop lettuce and not ruin everything. So they exaggerated a little bit for the story, a little. It's not that bad and that scary. Although I will tell you, and some of the people here know that it's true. I would rather not have, if you wanted to invite me over, or if you wanted to cook something for me, I would really rather not have you try to do some kosher meat. I would really rather not have you do that. You don't have the kosher utensils, and you don't have, and when I have meat, everything is much stricter when the meat is around. So even like a kosher hot dog, it's just, I wouldn't want you to do that. If I'm having dairy, I'm not as worried about it. But if I'm having meat, I worry about it, and I would rather not have anybody do that. So I will eat out. I will eat fish out, and I will eat veggie and dairy out, but I will not eat meat out unless I know that it's a strictly kosher restaurant. And that doesn't exist here. I have one more movie that I'd like to show you, if that's okay, unless you have some questions. Is that okay? All right, let me show you this one. This one is kosher food is more than
Omnitsky Deli looks like any other food store at first glance, but a closer look at the labels and you'll see it's all kosher.
According to the trade magazines, double-digit growth in the kosher industry for the last 13 years, fastest growing ethnic food in North America right now.
What are the ingredients going into this product? Kosher is quality assurance. Quality assurance that the product that you buy off the shelf that has kosher, the rabbi knows exactly what went into the product.
The rules governing kosher foods are taken from the Bible, which states that meat and dairy should not be consumed together.
you'll see we have just kosher, and over here we have kosher with a little D. The D stands for kosher dairy, which means that in this product we have dairy ingredients.
Kosher dairy should...
Can you see it? You see where the kosher is on the bottom left-hand corner of each of these boxes? So the milk chocolate is dairy, and it's telling you that. And the dark chocolate is usually parv, and it's going to say, this one happens to tell you not just that it's kosher dairy or kosher parv, but it's also telling you in Hebrew that it's chalav Yisrael, which means that the dairy, the milk, is 100% kosher, that it is not made with any ingredient that might be considered not kosher, that it's that even someone ultra-Orthodox wouldn't mind having that.
not be consumed with meat. However, kosher parv or neutral, which contains no meat and no dairy, can be consumed with either.
And
kosher parv has no dairy and no meat.
No meat, right.
So it's good for vegetarians.
It's vegetarians,
vegans.
Vegans. 80% of the kosher consumer are non-Jews.
80%.
Food safety is one of our objectives, one of our purposes to make sure that's a safe product.
And if you're looking for clean food with very few chemicals, this is a really good option.
Exactly. Kosher has nothing to do with the rabbi blesses something. It has to do very much is that are you up to the code or you're not up to the code? It's black or white. You broke the rule, sorry, you're not kosher.
We have a very large standard.
Any food business is challenging to begin with. I think kosher food is probably exponentially more challenging.
So if you have a kosher deli like this, if you were selling like slices of cheese and slices of meat, it would have to have totally different counter with different cutting materials and different scales and everything else. You would not share the same, any of the above, with the dairy and the meat.
Because you have to deal with the rabbis, who sometimes can be very tough.
Yes.
They're tough, but they love what they do.
I feel we're bringing a better standard of food. We're servicing people. We're helping people with their food choices. So if I can make people healthier, happier, what else greater gift could you have in life?
In Vancouver, I'm Kendall Harris for The Express.
In Shreveport, the kosher deli, there's no kosher deli. It's in Dallas. It's in Metairie. The closest kosher. Actually, so if you wanted to buy kosher meat, then you'd have to go to the kosher butcher, which would be in Dallas or in Metairie. Those are the closest butchers. We have frozen kosher food at the Kroger. And we have good news, the Kroger that's here on Uri. We have good news from Albertson, too. Albertson just became part of the Dallas district. And if you lived in Dallas, the Albertsons in Dallas have huge kosher food sections, including kosher delis. So you can go and buy sandwiches from the deli thing, or just buy like you want a pound of turkey, or pastrami, or turkey pastrami, or chopped liver, or whatever you want. They've got it all there. They've got much larger selections of dry goods, but the Kroger here has a nice selection. The Albertsons has a nice selection of dry goods. They don't yet have the frozen things. Brookshire's online has dry goods, which are like soup mixes and some things like that, and they also sometimes have salami chubs. We like those. We get those. But it's not easy to have any meat. And we joke that my kids, the only kosher Chinese meat foods that they ever ate was if you buy ramen noodles. And there's only one brand of ramen noodles, and only one of the flavor packets of the ramen noodles is not treif. Treif is the opposite of kosher. The word treif literally meant torn. So if you saw an animal on the side of the road and it was torn, you couldn't eat it, even if it started off as a kosher qualifying animal. So we thought that you had to take a kosher hot dog and chop it up in ramen noodles, and that's how you got a meat Chinese meal. I mean, that was all we had. Then we went traveling, and in Atlanta, there's a Kroger with a kiosk that's Chinese food. It was delicious. It was my kids' favorite part of this trip. We went to Washington, D.C. It was their favorite part of the trip, was real kosher food that wasn't, boring, and kosher hot dogs. So it's not easy to do in Shreveport. You have to go to Dallas. And we sometimes, over the years, we've gotten together like a co-op where everybody who wanted kosher food would order, and then they'd send like a refrigerator truck, or people who go back and forth a lot, and they would get it for us. But for example, 2 years ago, I ordered a kosher turkey, 14-pound turkey from Dallas, from one of the stores that I go to when I go to Dallas to buy food. And I called them on Friday and I said, I've got a friend coming through, she's going to be there on Sunday. Can I order it and give you my credit card and then just let her pick it up and bring it back to me? 14-pound turkey was almost 80-something. It was over $80. Over $80 for a 14-pound turkey. Then last year, we had the rabbi who was coming once a month from Houston. And I was in a car accident. He said, can I get you anything? I got to stop for food anyway. And he brought a 14-pound turkey from Houston, and it was under $40. And he bought these rotisserie chickens that were delicious, and they were under $10 a piece. That's like real people food. I mean, we never, ever, ever, ever get anything like that. So it was very exciting. But you can't get those things. So then I guess it's about time for us to go, but I have one more adorable story that some of you have heard before. We have a summer camp here, a day camp for little kids. And every morning it's my job. I do circle time, and I sing with them, and I tell them stories, and we learn basic Hebrew vocabulary like colors and numbers and things like that. We do some fun songs and things. And then I'm supposed to take the order for lunch. And in previous years, we used to cook the lunch. Did we talk about this last time? We did this last time? So the kosher hot dogs. So she said, we can't eat those kosher hot dogs because we don't keep kosher. And so I said, what did you eat for breakfast? And she said, Cheerios. And I said, check your Cheerios. They're going to have that little UO on it. And a lot of people piped up about what they had. And most people, unless there were marshmallows, and marshmallows have gelatin, but most people were eating kosher. So even when you're not thinking about it, a lot of what you eat is kosher. The trick is the rest of the restrictions. Does that help? So then the other problem is that Passover comes. And Passover adds a whole new layer. Because in addition to keeping those dairy and meat problems, there's also the fact that in the Torah it says that you're not allowed to have any chametz, which has to do with the leavening things. And so we have a whole different two sets of dishes just for Passover that has never touched anything that is of the grains, nothing that had grains in it, unless it was matzah, and that's really strict. So when you're trying to keep kosher, you have that batel bashishim, that it could be a 1/60th, but there's a zero tolerance for having chametz in your house for Passover. And so we're really, really strict about that. We won't let anything into the house on our dishes if it ever touched anything that was grains. And that's another story for another time, I guess. So what do we want to learn we do not have class next Wednesday. There's a big, important Jewish Federation meeting here next week. But on the following week, we will return. We've got at least 2 more weeks of this basic Judaism. So do we have a request of something? Yes?
Just Jewish traditions and holidays.
Traditions, especially about holidays? That sounds great. So we will do Jewish traditions and holidays, and we'll deal with holidays, calendar, and maybe life cycle if we could squish that into an hour.
At some point, I'd like to do like a general Q&A.
That would be good. And it's funny.
All the things that we're thinking about as you're speaking.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Jot down a whole bunch of questions. And you can always email me questions, by the way. I'm really good about at 2 o'clock in the morning answering questions. I had